When ESG runs into resistance at budget stage, it's often treated as a persuasion problem. More explanation follows, the case gets refined. The assumption is that if ESG were framed better, approval would come. For business owners, that assumption is worth challenging. Your budget isn't neutral. It's one of the clearest expressions of what you believe is necessary, who you believe owns risk, and which exposures you're willing to carry. What moves easily through your budget tells you what you consider unavoidable. What keeps getting delayed tells you what you believe can wait. Seen that way, ESG budget resistance isn't friction, it's information. If ESG keeps struggling to secure funding in your business, it's rarely because the risks aren't real. It's because they're not clearly owned. Responsibility may be mentioned in strategy documents or policies, but ownership is blurred. And when no one clearly owns a risk, budgets hesitate. That's why ESG funding often takes a familiar form. Small approvals that need constant renewal, initiatives that never quite scale, allocations that reset every cycle and have to be argued for again. That pattern isn't accidental. It's what happens when a business hasn't decided who is accountable when something goes wrong. Now compare that with how you fund risks that are clearly owned. Cybersecurity, health and safety, financial controls. These areas still face scrutiny, but their funding isn't repeatedly questioned. You've already accepted that the risk exists and needs governing. ESG doesn't usually get that same treatment, not because it's less material, but because it sits across functions, it cuts through incentives, and it surfaces trade-offs that don't fit neatly into short-term planning. And when that happens, budget decisions quietly treat ESG as optional, even though the exposure is not. This is the key point for business owners. Pushing harder at budget stage doesn't reduce your risk. Better arguments don't create ownership. They just mask the fact that certain exposure in your business doesn't yet have a clear home. The more useful question isn't why is ESG hard to fund, but what risks in my business are effectively unmanaged because no one owns them? Which exposures are being tolerated by default? Which decisions are being postponed because accountability is unclear? And which future costs are being traded for short-term budget comfort? Budget resistance isn't something to overcome. It's a signal. It tells you exactly where risk governance hasn't been established and where your business may already be more exposed than you realize. Tomorrow, I'll be discussing strategic blindness in risk identification. See you then.